To really get into the history of Chrysler's turbine cars, we have to cover the story of George Huebner. George was really key to many of Chrysler's innovations. He joined Chrysler in 1931 as an engineer, and by 1946 he was their chief engineer. I feel a whole episode could be done in George's life alone, but a few key achievements of his was the IV-2220 project, which was a V16 2500 horsepower fighter jet engine, and Chrysler's first Hemi head motor. This earned him the nickname the Father of the Hemi. He also worked at Chrysler's missile division. Yes, you heard that right. Chrysler had a missile division, which was news to me. But what he's most known for is his involvement with Chrysler's turbine cars. While assigned to Chrysler's automotive research division, George and a group of other engineers began to explore the idea of a turbine-powered car. During the 1950s, Chrysler was arguably the leader in turbine research, so it must have seemed natural to him. Now, I'm not an engineer, and the inner workings of a turbine engine are confusing to me, so I can't get too detailed. But at this time, there was a big problem with turbine engines, and it was exhaust temperatures and fuel consumption. There was obvious benefits like fewer moving parts and less weight, but those drawbacks were huge. Well, George's team, they engineered a regenerator that took advantage of the hot exhaust gases, much like a turbocharger that reduced exhaust temperatures and fuel consumption. It was a massive leap forward in turbine engine design for that matter. None of the others who had ventured in the world of turbine cars had anything like this. Now with a viable motor, in 1953, the team installed the turbine engine into an otherwise stock 1954 Plymouth Belvedere.
You know, they say it's difficult for a woman to keep a secret. Well, I'll tell you a secret. Sometimes it's pretty difficult for a man to keep a secret. For instance, here's one that I have been itching to talk about for over a year. See this Plymouth Belvedere, one of the great new cars of the forward look. Take a really good look, because I'd like to have you try and tell the difference between this Plymouth and the one you're about to see.
Actually, there are two differences about this car. One, you can't buy it at any price. Two, it runs with no carburetor, no piston rings, no radiator, with only one spark plug, and on ordinary fuels you can buy anywhere. And here under the hood, you see the big difference. It's the Chrysler gas turbine engine, the first turbine engine ever to be successfully installed in a standard passenger car. Yes, here is another great first from Chrysler Corporation. More than 200 pounds lighter than a conventional engine of similar power, it has less than 1/5 as many moving parts. Developed by Chrysler Corporation to power a regular production model, you can hardly pick it out from other Plymouths, unless you happen to spot the special insignia that tells you there's a revolutionary engine under that hood. The horsepower it develops is 120. However, the driving power it delivers to the wheels equals that of a 160 horsepower conventional engine. As for fuel economy, it is comparable to any 120 horsepower car engine today. What's more, a gas turbine engine will run on anything from gasoline to heavy fuel oil. This car has no radiator. Its engine is air-cooled, therefore never needs water. Other attempts to design a practical turbine engine resulted in extremely hot, burning exhaust gases. But Chrysler Corporation engineers licked that problem. The exhaust temperature is cooler than that of the average car today. You can hold your hand over this exhaust pipe and not get burned. The Turbine Special is just one of many research projects in progress at Chrysler Corporation. And as each new advance is perfected, it will be made available to you to keep you ahead in car performance, in safety, and in styling.
Now do you see why I wanted to shout about this? And even though the turbine engine may not be available for some time to come, the important thing to you and me is that it typifies the kind of engineering that you've come to expect from Chrysler Corporation. It's the years ahead thinking that has resulted in today's Plymouth, Dodge, DeSoto, Chrysler, and the exclusive Imperial.
The team bounced around and installed turbines in a few other cars until 1956 when the next big leap happened. Chrysler installed an improved version of the 1954 turbine engine into a 1956 Plymouth, and on March 26th, George Huebner set off from the Chrysler building in New York City on a cross-country road trip. With a caravan of 14 people in tow, carrying mostly fuel and other supplies, the 1956 Plymouth made the 4,862-kilometer trip to Los Angeles in 4 days. By all accounts, the trip was a major success. The car required only 2 minor repairs, neither of which were engine related, and averaged around 13 miles per gallon, burning unleaded gas and diesel oil. Due to the success of the coast-to-coast trip, Chrysler responded by moving the program from the Highland Park Chrysler plant to a larger facility on Greenfield Road in Detroit. The next few years were spent improving materials in the turbine engine. Many of the parts required exotic metals. For a jet engine on a plane, that wasn't much of an issue, but in a mass-produced automobile, costs had to be kept down. With the help of metallurgist Emma D. Roy and engineer Giovanni Savanuzzi, they did just that, creating a second-generation turbine engine. In December 1958, the next-generation turbine-powered car was ready, a 1959 four-door Plymouth. The vehicle set off on its 576-mile road trip from Detroit to New York City. Once again, the test engine performed amazingly well by all accounts. The new engine made 200 horsepower, double the original, and averaged 19 miles per gallon. A pretty amazing feat considering it almost doubled the horsepower of Chrysler's inline six for the time, with roughly the same fuel rating. By the early 1960s, Chrysler pulled out all the stops. By 1961, 3 cars had the new third-generation turbine engine, a 4-door 1960 Plymouth hardtop, a 1960 2.5-ton Dodge truck, and the very unique 1961 Chrysler Turboflight concept car. At the end of 1961, a 62 Dart was fitted with the new turbine engine dubbed the Turbo Dart, and was driven from New York to Los Angeles once again. This third-generation turbine engine outperformed the previous ones because it had reduced fuel consumption and had engine braking. In 1962, a Plymouth Fury was also added. During this time, the turbine-powered cars were going on a massive cross-country tour, making appearances at car shows and press functions. Some dealers were also lucky enough to display the cars in showrooms so that the general public had access. The hype was growing, and Chrysler had no intentions of disappointing people. Unlike when Ford launched the Edsel brand, where they promised the car of the future, Chrysler was working on something truly unique. Jet planes were new, and the technology would revolutionize automobile transportation. In 1962, Chrysler announced that they intended to build turbine cars and loan them to the general public. In preparation for this public launch, George and his team worked on the 4th-generation turbine engine. They were able to shave off an additional 40 pounds and improve acceleration. Finally ready, on May 14, 1963, Chrysler revealed the car to the world at a press conference. The car was styled by Elwood Engel, and the body was built by famed Italian car builders Ghia. The 2-door hardtop sported a beautiful bronze color called turbine bronze. The roof was covered with a black vinyl top, and the interior sported bronze-colored bucket seats. It had an independent coil spring front suspension and rear leaf springs, which was not typical for Chrysler at the time, who relied heavily on torsion bars. 203 men and women were selected to take part in test driving these cars. Each person would get a car for 3 months and only have to pay for fuel, providing they agreed to maintain the appearance of the car and keep detailed records for Chrysler. They also had to agree to provide an interview to Chrysler shortly after returning the car. The program identified several problems with the cars. Some of the most common complaints were the 8-step starting process, poor acceleration, and fuel consumption. While the car got good mileage for the time on the highway, it was pretty poor at idle and low speeds due to its RPMs. The most cited advantages were reduced maintenance, ease of starting in different conditions, and how smooth and vibration-free the car was. Jay Leno gives a great demonstration of how smooth the car is right here.
I want to show you how smooth this engine is. As you can see, the water doesn't move at all. What movement there is just the residual effect of me putting the glass down. But look at that. Look how smooth that is. Pretty amazing.
One other benefit of the turbine engine was that they could run on just about any fuel, many of which were cheaper than gasoline at the time. The only fuel drivers were told not to use was leaded gasoline, which ironically was the most common fuel for the time. The lead would leave deposits that would eventually damage the engine, but the car ran on everything from diesel to home heating oil. The fuel options were so diverse that Mexican President Adolfo López Mateos ran the car in tequila when it was down in Mexico on his cross-country tour. Overall, the program was a great success. The cars logged more than 1 million miles from October 1963 to January 1966 and proved to be very reliable. Unfortunately, though, 46 of the 55 cars were destroyed in April 1966. 45 of the cars were crushed at a scrapyard in Detroit, and one was destroyed at the Chrysler Proving Grounds. The initial explanation was that it was done to avoid tariffs on the Ghia bodies, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I can't find the tariff rate for cars in the 60s, but I highly doubt it's higher than it is now, which is 2.5%. The Truth About Cars did a great estimate on what it would cost. By their account, the cost of the bodies could have been anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000 per car. This is based on how the cost of other coach-built cars were for the time. With 2.5% tariff, Chrysler was looking at roughly $500 per car. Given how much Chrysler invested in these cars, it would have been a drop in the bucket. It's more likely, given the complexity of these cars, the exotic parts and materials required, and the specially trained mechanics, that it just wasn't feasible to sell them to the public. A Chrysler executive was later quoted in Look magazine as saying, "Our main objective was research, and we did not want turbines turning up in used car parking lots." In all reality, though, Chrysler was really close to offering turbine-powered cars to be sold to the public. During the test program, meetings were had, and it was decided that a limited run of production cars were to be made. The body that was chosen? Well, it was a 1966 Dodge Charger. Apparently, tooling was ordered, and the plan was to build about 500 or so. So what killed it? Well, the same things that killed the whole muscle car era, really. Insurance companies, smog laws, and NOx requirements took their toll on the turbine program, killing it just as it started to prove feasible. With all the regulations coming down the pipe from regulators, the engineers just couldn't dedicate the time to make these turbine engines feasible. While the immediate plan to put a turbine-powered car into production died, the turbine program itself lived on. Engineers apparently fixed many of the issues like the acceleration lag and continued to move the program forward. In the early 1970s, Chrysler received grants from the EPA to see if the turbine engine could be a cleaner alternative to piston engines. The program saw a Dodge Aspen, LeBaron, and Murata all get 7th generation turbine engines. But unfortunately, by 1979, Chrysler was in financial trouble and a bailout was required to keep the company afloat. One of the conditions of that bailout? Well, it was to scrap the turbine program because it was considered too costly and risky. So after 40 years of effort, engineering, and innovation, the turbine program was officially dead. While consumers were not going to see a turbine-powered car, the knowledge gained from all that effort was not in vain. The knowledge would be used by Chrysler, and they would go on to win the contract to build the M1 Abrams Tank, which is powered by a massive turbine engine.
This is, sir has now armed the gun.